Maybe monitor for questions. Right. Okay.
Like 8.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's pretty, might be a new record.
All right, all right. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I know it's been a really hectic last few weeks here with Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. I hope everybody is safe and their properties are good and their plants are good as well. I know I learned firsthand which native plants can survive hurricane winds and which ones can't. I've got some replenishing to do in my own yard. But hopefully tonight will be a welcome distraction from the hurricanes and kind of more life back to normal like we're used to it. As far as Selby Gardens, they took some pretty good damage too. We almost couldn't have this meeting here because they didn't have power for so long, and their Wi-Fi is still a little bit on the fritz too. So we'll see how that goes tonight. And they actually had 6 boats wash ashore that are still on the property, including like this 50-foot yacht as well. Yeah, I tried to look at it earlier, but it's all closed off. But anyways, tonight we have Damon Moore speaking. If you haven't met him yet, he is a restoration practitioner here in Manatee County, actually all of Southwest Florida. He's been doing it for 20 years. He had 10 years in the private consulting sector, and then he has 10 years with Manatee County as a habitat restoration specialist. And more recently, in 2022, he started his own nonprofit, founded it, called Oyster River Ecology, which I'll read a little bit of the mission statement. But basically, the focus of this nonprofit is to restore ecosystems and preserve ecological functions while increasing the understanding of these natural systems. So he's played a big role in restoration here locally over the past 22, 23 years. I've got to know him really well in the past few years here, and I can't think of someone that's done more for habitat restoration in our area. And tonight he's going to speak about a couple of different projects he's done at Perico Preserve over in Manatee County, and we're really lucky to have him here. So without further ado, Damon Moore. Yeah.
So Elliot got to know me, and that means he got to be on my board of directors. Because as you guys know, he's a go-getter and gets after it. So I have 96 slides up here today and a delay on the Wi-Fi from what I hear. So I'm going to try and rip through these things as quickly as possible. But as Elliot mentioned, first one, by the parking lot, there was an area of nasty grasses that we never dealt with the whole time we worked on that project. And it made me mad. So I'm gonna have to dance. I don't know what this screen means. Oh,
There we go. That's it.
smooth.
So slide 1, we're already having technical difficulties.
They'll probably
See,
be
you
about
weren't alone, Liz.
4 o'clock this morning. We'll get done.
We're trying this new technology called Bluetooth. We're connected to the projector, so we'll see here.
If they have it on Zoom, it's
You need to have this dongle again.
Of course, we can't get past slide 1.
Yes, I can.
So it's loading this thing. Okay.
Start now.
There we go. All right, should work out, Damon.
Go down. Don't touch the dongle.
I never touch the dongle, don't
Never
worry.
touch the dongle.
It's the first time that's ever been told to me. So as far as the area up front, there's a lot of different ways to do these kind of turf conversion projects. Somebody's going to be upset that I used as much herbicide as I did. There's a lot of ways to do it, but this is how we did it at this particular site. This is going to be fun. Imagine you're looking at logos of the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program in Manatee County, and we said, thank you so much for these grants. Before we talk about this project, we couldn't do it without your money. There it is. Look at those volunteers that came out. They did such an awesome job. And see, I'm cheating it. I started it now. So first thing there, if you are going to try and take on some kind of project like this, where you're like, we're going to change this turf into something better, size, your site selection, don't bite off more than you can chew, because you don't want to spread yourself so thin that you can't give it the necessary resources to see it through and get it done. So we did a good job of that, of course. Location, we chose it because it's public land and it's really easy to get to, so you can bring a whole bunch of volunteers out, and there's a restroom right there. Those things really kind of come into play when you're going to do something with a lot of volunteer effort. Now just imagine a map of the areas I was talking about with green hues and a parking lot. It looks nice. This is at Perico Preserve on Manatee Avenue in West Bradenton. If you went to the beach, you went too far. You should come. We're going out there Sunday. Ah. So I shall paint a picture with words. Don't worry about it. I got this. So if you're on Zoom, you'll probably still get to see it. I'm not sure. So when we start this, obviously one of the first things we want to know is what is existing in place there now, because not every time is everything that you start with a bad thing. So being the plant people we are, this is where we really shine. You go out and identify every single thing you have. And what I tend to do is make highlights of, these are the things that are really bad, that are going to be really hard to get rid of. And these are the things that are really, really good that I can't really replace. So I need to work around. On this site, the really, really bad were torpedo grass and Bermuda grass. We're probably all familiar with those, being Native Plant Society people. This site, surprisingly, once we started looking really closely, also had Florida loosestrife in it, which is a state something listed plant. It's special. We like that one. We don't want to come through with our big jugs of herbicide and blast it. So now if you can just imagine, I'm going to touch the dongle and see what happens. So this could get interesting. I put this together on a very, very big, complicated, colorful spreadsheet that has red things that are bad and green things that are good. And it's long and it has Latin names. And I hand it to people and they think, wow, you're smart. Look at you. I'll show you it if you ever want to see it. I'll give you a hard copy, paper. We can't go wrong with that. So when we start with this project, we started with kind of overgrown pasture grasses that get mowed once a year was kind of the best. The rest of it was kind of overgrown shrubby bush thing. So we wanted to kind of start from scratch more or less. So step one was to go through And power tools, chainsaws, mowers, cut everything down and kind of open it up and start fresh. Here's where you would see pictures of Sean with a chainsaw and one of the volunteers just hacking through a bunch of dog fennel. And then at the end, kind of an open, wide open, clear patch. So he's trying a new dongle.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just have to try a different one. We'll see. Otherwise, I think Damon's descriptive words are pretty
I'm kinda
right
having
on.
fun with it.
Yeah.
Just-
Let's see what this one is.
Did you also cut the good stuff that you wanted to keep down too? or-
Almost all of it.
Okay, so it was just a,
Pretty
Clear cut.
uniform. If there was things like cabbage palms and that sort of stuff,
right.
let's see how this goes. Don't clap yet. Hey, hey, hey. So another major part, because we had those nasty things like torpedo grass and Bermuda grass, that you cannot go and hand pull those things away. You have to use herbicides on them. So we did a combination of just all out broadcast, spray it all, or where there was little areas where if you know your plants, you can be very selective and only selectively apply to the bad stuff. That's what we did. So on the left, where it looks like blue camouflage, that was selective. On the right, that's blue death for everything. Worked. That's what we were missing. So as I mentioned, one of the fun surprises we found when we looked at this and thought, oh, this is all just garbage, we need to start completely over, is that hidden in here is this little Florida loosestrife plant. But the problem was that little loosestrife plant was just completely intermixed with torpedo grass. And you can't really selectively do the one or the other. So with this one, we did use a grass-specific herbicide called clethodim and oversprayed. And sure enough, we killed the torpedo grass, but did not kill the loosestrife. You have to be really careful with that sort of stuff. And you also have to follow it up with management, because I don't think the loosestrife will be out and showing itself right now, but the torpedo grass is creeping back a little bit. So now that I've admitted to you, I am one that uses the evils of herbicides. There are those things for people who think I'm a bad person. There are ways that claim to be able to, I said claim to be able to do this without using herbicides. This is your, if you're this person, you want this resource from the Xerces Society. They talk about all of these awesome methods of solarization, smother cropping, repeated cultivation, things that take years and years to actually accomplish and work really well in areas that you don't have subtropical weed pressure like we do. These things work. I have tried a lot of these things because I don't want to be the herbicide guy, but I end up doing this for 2 years and then being the herbicide guy after I wasted a lot of people's times and spent a lot of money on plants. So, oh, it's speeding up now. We're getting there. One thing I always recommend for groups that are trying to take on like these larger turf conversion projects is work with people who've done this before. Most of the time we're super into it. We're willing to help anybody for free. That might be the worst thing I could have possibly said. But we'll certainly give advice and tell it like lessons learned. It's just part of the culture of native plant people. We're awesome. I have found that I go usually with a lot of small plants, because if it's the right plant in the right place, it's going to grow if you start small or start large. So I would rather learn my lessons on a lesser budget than what would go on there. Really important thing, if you're going to do this in any place that is going to be seen by people other than us Native Plant Society people who can go out and look at a bunch of old rotted logs and weeds and think, wow, there's nature taking its course. It's so awesome they did that. Whereas most people would call code enforcement on us and tell us it's time to throw them out. Messy ecosystems, orderly frames. This is it's getting old now. It's a while back. It's a landscape architect But basically it's an instruction manual for how to get what we want as far as the ecosystem function of these really messy ecosystems that we like, but put little borders around it and rocks and mowed lines so that it's very appealing to the eye as well. It's like Sweet Bay Nursery. When you look at the butterfly area up front and they have the little trails, they got all of those things in there that we like. But because there's trails and signs, it looks like it was done on purpose, so we can get away with a lot more. You guys probably know about all these websites. Some of them for sourcing plants, like planting and that sort of thing. If you're starting to get like more things that you're like about to buy at wholesale, those are worth checking out. This is basically lightning speed now. This is like always been kind of the bane of my existence with every project I've done, is that we plant the plant and then we high five and we take some pictures and be like, we're done, we did it, awesome, check us out. Habitat establishment period adaptive management. This is probably what should actually mark the start of the project, but this is once you've installed all those lovely plants and you still have that weed bank of all those nasty things there. This is what you do in the interim time to get those plants that you planted to an established period, not that we just planted you and the weeds are going to take over period. And it's also, things don't always go to plan. With this project in particular, we did this great planting event. We're timing it to the wet season, and then the wet season was just like, not this year, buddy. We're not here for you at all. We also had this, it's fun. You get surprise plants that come in when you change everything around and it gets a little bit wetter for some reason, or the soil temperatures change. We had all this stuff beautifully cleaned out. And then Elliot called me one day when he was driving by and he said, man, there is something that's like 6 foot tall all over half of this whole planting zone. And she said, I think it's that white clover. I was like, I've never seen it 6 foot tall before. Guess I know my plants better than Elliot does. We go see what this is. I go out there and sure enough, it's the white clover and it's all 6 feet tall. It's not a native plant, but it doesn't usually persist. But in this case, it was just the mass of it was shading out the grasses and stuff that we put in there. But luckily, like it's a legume. So what you don't want to do with anything in the legume family, those seeds last in the seed bank forever. So get it out of there before it goes fully to seed. So, and it's an annual, so we don't have to go through here and make it rain herbicide again. This time we just mowed everything out and was as selective as we could to save a couple of the good things in there. But, oh, this is, oh, sorry. You haven't seen it yet. That's a surprise. This was our summer that did not cooperate with rain. So we planted this thing in August, ready in the height of the wet season, and then bam, nothing. The plants did not do well with that. Even with a lot of, the county had a big 2,000-gallon water truck that they kept hitting it over and over and over again, but you can't put that much water out with that much area. So we did conduct several replanting events and supplemental planting events. We seeded it with Flavaria seeds that actually originated from some that Tom gave me, I think probably 10 years ago now. That originally I planted at Perico Preserve, and then I harvested those seeds and took them to Robinson Preserve, and then we harvested those and brought those back to Perico Preserve. So those seeds, it's the gift that keeps giving. We also did a bunch of bunchgrass cuttings moving around, and then we got a great little grant from the Restore America's Estuaries, where we just kind of pleaded the case and said, you know, everybody wants to see this work. We need some more money. So they gave us like $1,400. So this part's going to be kind of frustrating. Hopefully it goes quicker than this. So this is what we started with. Oh boy. Okay, it's good. This is herbicide death the day of. This is August, right after the initial planting. So a lot of tiny, tiny little plants in there. Mostly 2-inch liners for the kind of run-of-your-mill cover ground, bunch grasses, that sort of thing. This is us following up with selective herbicide treatments as things started to kind of come back in, sort out the good stuff from the bad stuff. We did this over and over again. You can start to see the plants are starting to get a little bit of shoulder on them. I don't know if that's a technical term or not, shoulder. Oh, the next one's good. Just wait. Oh. Hey, there we are. So this one, we harvested a bunch of wild seeds from areas of Perico and Robinson Preserve and just kind of spread seed all over the place out there, dug a lot of that stuff in to get good mineral soil contact. Now it's going quick. Just more herbicide treatment events follow up. This was after one of the bunch grass transplants. This is the big mass of white clover. It was like, okay, that I don't know why that area, but like that was like a quarter of the site. It just got real happy. Cut it down. If this wasn't laggy, I'd go back and forth a couple times because it just makes me happy to do that. And it dried out. And we supplemental planted it again. But this is about a month or so ago, and it's coming along. There was a couple of new people at the county that decided to mow certain parts of it that weren't supposed to, and that will continue to happen. It's fine. Oh man, no, I wish these weren't in here. This was just the back and forth. So total 6,800 plants in that area in 12,000 square feet, 150 volunteer hours. I had to put this extra, I used the professional hours as match for some of the grants. So anytime there was any county staff that worked in any, it was accounting people out there, that's professional help. So, and again, thank you all so much for doing the money part. That's important. So I hope I got enough time to get through this slow. So aside from the front, I also had the pleasure of, I started working on this project in I think 2006. We're doing the wetland lines to figure out how do we do some restoration at Perico Preserve. Somebody asked where this was earlier. Here's the slide. Manatee Avenue, Palmasola Bay, Henry Island, Perico Preserve, Neal Preserve, Robinson Preserve, Emerson Preserve. Manatee County did a good job of preserving some coastal upland areas and a lot of mangroves out there too. So a little bit of site history on this one. Before it got messed up, most of this site was pine flatwoods with some coastal scrub, rimmed with mangroves and coastal wetlands like marshes and those sorts of things. There are Native American uses of the site. There's 2 documented sites on that property. And the name Perico Preserve, Perico comes from a Cuban fisherman named Perico Pompon, who apparently did not have any kind of rancho fishing settlement on Perico Island, but hung out there a lot, so it got his name. That's what the archaeologist told me. From 1930 to 2000, all sorts of different kinds of agriculture went out there. And with agriculture at that time came planting windrows from Australian pine trees, which caused a lot of problem. Lots of ditching and diking. From 2000 to 2007, it went into a lawsuit, which is this whole other presentation that's really interesting about how that works, because private company bought it. I'll try to make this super quick. Private investment firm bought it. They were going to turn it all into high density condos and that sort of thing, higher than the county's land development code allowed for. So the county said, oh, no, you don't. So they said, nah, we're going to become City of Bradenton. So they went into City of Bradenton, and the City of Bradenton was like, yeah, okay. And then everybody lawyered up. And the settlement was you can have your density over there. And that's all where Jimmy Buffett restaurant land is and all that other stuff over there. But Perico Preserve was to remain green space, and the county had the option to purchase it. They purchased it for, I think it was like $6 million or something like that, which was an incredibly low amount of money for like 50 acres of high and dry uplands in that part of the county. It was not necessarily needing to be a restoration project. You got to give credit to Charlie Hunsaker for convincing everybody in the world that that was really the only viable option there. Could have been a lot of other things. Just some other interesting things as you go through time on this thing. This map is from 1927, I believe it was. But you can see on there, they already talked about having these orange groves and stuff on that side of Perico Island. I always like digging into the history to find out whatever you can find out. But this was an interesting thing from 1902, where basically this is a lot of words, where what it said was, it was a cold winter. All of the oranges in Florida were knocked out. You can't get an orange. And this was somebody correcting that. It's like, actually, Perico Island has oranges. They didn't freeze. They're supplying the whole East Coast. Get you a Perico orange. They're the best. Also, interesting bits of history. This is very hard to read. It's painstaking to try and sort this stuff out. But this is when they surveyed the section, township, and range lines of all of Florida. This is the surveyors. Oh, well, no, it's okay. I'm gonna take it. I've done that before. Like I can feel my ears. It's all good. No worries. So I like to any site that has section lines going through it, I pull those old surveyors notes to see what they said about habitats. They were very vague. I wish they gave more details, but once they get out of the mangroves, lean, barren, flat, pine, and saw palmetto. Not really this deep species list I would like. But one thing that was very interesting is when they got down to this section, they noted circular white sand mound 9 feet high to the west, which was like, oh, okay, what's this? Let me call the archaeologist. And he said, yes, we've looked for that mound. They think it was lost to agriculture. They've done all sorts of test holes, never been able to find anything. But you can see on this site, we dug a lot of wetlands out of what were uplands. We made real sure that when we were to the other side of that line, we recreated a sand mound there. We didn't want to dig and find something and curse the site or anything like that. So this is just this is typical views of what this site looked like. A bunch of mowed exotic grasses by that time. This was a lot of the Australian pine trees that we came in right away and just kind of cut those. Like the whole thing was rimmed with Australian pine forest. I really probably should update these after pictures since they're getting to be almost 8 or 10 years old now. That's why we're doing the field trip though. So in planning these things, really important to kind of know where you're starting from. So that's where the plant people come into play. We got to get out there and tell everybody what's what. We know that no restoration plan is going to have those category 1 or category 2 exotics in them. They shouldn't. So regardless of what your plans are and permitting and funding and everything else, go ahead and start getting rid of those things. So that was one of the things we did there. Target habitats for this site, we were looking. It's really hard to find a good reference habitat site for coastal upland habitats because we've pretty much destroyed all of the good coastal upland habitats. The reference site for flatwoods for this project was Oscar Shear Park. That's how we kind of determined what we wanted for spacing of trees and what our goals were for diversity in the ground cover. But mostly we wanted to have a diverse ground cover. That would have been a win for us just in itself. We also wanted to provide some wading bird habitat. So the wetland design were all kind of specific for different aspects of what the wading birds need. But also important is you can have all these wonderful ideas, but it's not gonna help if you can't get there. So you need to kind of sit down and really think, do you have those resources? The most important thing that always gets ignored on restoration projects is if you do the project, can you maintain that project? Because we were pushing really hard to go for fire and that department knows how to burn stuff really well. We said, yes, we're going to go for actual flatwoods habitats. So this is just a map of kind of what we started with. Red is bad. Green is good-ish. There's still a couple of bad things in there, but the red, this is mostly the ditch lines and the outside edges where the Australian pine trees where that was a lot of red in there. The talked about reference sites, talked about that. So I, again, always try to find whatever kind of historical references there are in the world about what grew on these sites to kind of give you some input on how to design them. This is an 1887 account of Perico Island, where again, they just didn't give us much plant lists. And it was pretty much the same thing the surveyor said was saw palmetto and some yellow pine. The early soils maps do a little bit better job on those soil types. You kind of have a geographic reference, and then they give you a slightly longer list of plants you can expect in those areas. I usually just kind of read aerials and say, this looks like scrub, this looks like flatwoods. That usually tends to, we generally know what grows in those things. But this is the earliest aerial on this site is 1940. And you can see, like, yes, we have some scrub in these kind of lighter areas, flatwoods here, a lot of salt tern habitat that's out there. And then you can see that's where those good oranges were grown. We grew those into houses though, so don't go looking for them. This is 1970s. You can see there's a lot of dirt bike trails and stuff where the orange groves used to go. That was my dad that did those. He's like, oh yeah, we used to go out there. He used to go everywhere out there all the time, but this was one of the places he used to go out there all the time. Another thing that was important to us was to look regionally at what habitats had been depleted the most. So this is a 1940 view of the West Bradenton area and West Bradenton 2016. Most of this area was developed prior to there being any kind of wetland regulations. So when there was a nice herbaceous wetland that fed all kinds of birds that was in the way of your street grid, you just filled that thing in and you had some really, really nice rich soils for those oak trees to grow really thick into. So where we saw, like, I mean, there were hundreds of these little wetlands all over the place. We thought this would be a good place to try and bring some of those things back. This is along those lines of, do you have the resources to maintain it? They've added some people, but since then, there was 27,000 acres that department managed with 12 people, with Duet being kind of the crown jewel as far as the actual ecological value. Most of it, it's really hard to argue. You guys need to, miss your burn frequency at Duet so that we can go spray weeds at Perico. So you have to really angle the habitat restoration to kind of meet that reality. For Perico, instead of taking that 50 acres that was originally uplands, more than half of that got turned into saltwater wetlands because pepper trees and Kogan grass and all that stuff does not grow in saltwater wetlands. So it makes it easier to maintain. Also, do you have a direction you can put smoke if you're going to burn it? Luckily on this one we did, because the county owned Robinson Preserve on the other side of the bayou, so we could just blow smoke all over Robinson Preserve. But it is an interesting, so I'm playing with fire here, literally. You can see behind the heat, all those new condos that went in with that additional density that was part of that lawsuit. And as soon as those came in, it was instant calls to the committee. They can't be doing that. And it was a fight for Mike Ellswick, not me, but he won it. So if you're really interested in how many acres of each type of habitat, come talk to me later. We'll pull this slide back up. Kind of a timeline of events as how those gone. Now to the fun pictures. So this was really fun with the neighbors because I had to have a really good relationship with the neighbors on the south side of this, because they had always had this open field. Nobody ever went out there. They didn't want any of that to change. So I painted this picture of beautiful nature and birds coming down. And then when it came project time, it looks like I'm getting ready to build Walmart. Silt fences coming in, digging everything up. So that's just, you learn to talk to the people a little bit differently and get them ready for that. But these are some of them, and I'll point these out again when we're out the site, because you can't recognize where these things are. But this is one of those recreated pothole wetlands like that, that's like semi-ephemeral. It's interesting too, and I think I have another picture of it, but you see the little things sticking up out of the water is once we dug down below where they were actively farming, those pieces of the old pine forest were still down there, and that's all old pine roots. But you can see as this started out, my vision of nature that I sold all the neighbors on, it took a little while because it started out looking like that. And then there was a lot of me and my blue death that I sprayed everywhere because we really wanted that diverse native ground cover, but we had 50 years of agriculture and a seed bank that was very well established of everything bad. So literally spent 2 years letting everything kill everything, let it come back up, kill everything, let it come back up. So almost every 2 months for 2 years, it was just redo herbicide treatments. Then once we had suppressed that seed bank, what we thought was well enough, we harvested seed. This came from Thomas Ranch. I think Thomas Ranch is a neighborhood now. Is it still there? Do you know? But this was as coastal of a flatwood site that burned at the right time of year, that had very, very, very low exotics cover. Our contractor harvested seed. This is called a flail vac. It's a big old vacuum that sits on front of a tractor, and it's awesome. So what we do, once you collect all that seed, we put that back down. You can see after 2 years of killing every green thing that tries to come up, it's kind of, some folks call it the nuclear bomb. That was mine. They call it the nuclear bomb approach, and it looks kind of like a moonscape. So what we do is take all that seed that was collected from the flail vac and we put it into a grasslander. It's a special kind of seeder just for these big fluffy native seeds. And we drive that around all over the place, and it opens up just a little tiny gap about 1/4 inch deep, directly deposits all those seeds. And then what you want to see is this, all those beautiful andropogons coming up in lines. You're thinking, boy, if I'd have had to pay $1 for every one of those, and I just did this over 20 acres, and I paid the contractor like $28,000 to do this, I saved everybody so much money. And it'd be awesome if you could just be that confident about it, but it's not how it works. It wasn't for me because this was the first time I had done this way. So you plant it, and then nothing happens for like months. And you're looking for any little speck of green to come up. And there's a lot of like, I'm better with it now. I've done some since then, and I don't stay up late at night stressing about it. But this was another area that we had seeded this. It was awesome. I was like, I saved everybody so much money. And then it got really rainy. And since we don't have plants uptaking everything, all that rain just kind of sheet flows off. So this was this beautiful sheet flow that sheet flowed all that seed into this one ditch. And that one ditch was the most beautiful native plant ditch there was. But like I could see that was the problem, and I could see the things that were starting to come back. Nothing across this whole like 1.5 acres were any good. So this was one where volunteers came into play. So we took this area and planted about 1.5 foot center, a 2-inch liner of all sorts of different stuff. And here we go again. They grow better when this is faster because I can just zip through these. It's going to keep going. You want another one? Let's do it. And I need to update this because again, it worked great. But now those trees are like, you can walk under their shade. It's pretty awesome. Another fun challenge is we created some of these awesome wetlands, and the ducks and everything came in right away, and they loved it. And the ducks especially, and they ripped up every single plant that we put in. And then they died. And then we found out that the neon green neighborhood that was to the south of us, they had one little low spot because you're supposed to, when you have a development, you're supposed to capture all your stormwater and you're supposed to treat all your stormwater and then you discharge it. You don't dump it on your neighbor. It's not their problem. It's your problem. You fix it. They had a low spot in their little berm. So a bunch of their neon green lawn juice came onto our site and made its way into this wetland where it grew this toxic soup. But at that time, we had access to prison labor and pitchforks. So we got it out. Why is it so weird looking? Does this look pretty? Field of green. It's supposed to be red, right? There it goes.
You're doing so good.
I'm pushing the dongle again. It's right back. All right. So it was just open sand after we seeded for such a long time. And then I started seeing stuff come up all over the place. And I'm like, yes, it's happening. Done it. And then it started to come up and then got big enough to where I could identify it. And I was like, this is yellow nutsedge. This is really bad. And I know that like it's early successional. If you disturb soils pretty much anywhere, yellow nutsedge will come up. It's in the seed bank everywhere. So at first I was like, well, it's in the seed bank everywhere. It's early succession. We'll go away. I'm not worried. Then it got just thick like this. And again, like I started to see germination of my little wiregrass babies under there. And then I started to see little germinated wiregrass babies die because they couldn't get enough sun and they were getting matted over by this stuff. So what I found, and ignore this one in my big fancy tables, you can look at it. What I found was with the nutsedge where it was like that, first thing was, you know, I've got a bent towards the herbicides. All right, I'll herbicide it. So I went out there and I herbicided it and it knocked it back. And I was like, yeah, I won. And then, because as I learned, when it's stressed out, it produces nutlets. And it will come back 3 times stronger after that because it's like, oh, it got burned, or oh, it's like it's a response to being grazed on. So it came back stronger. So I was like, all right, I'll hit you again, see what you got. And then stronger again. And then I'm like starting to freak out. Late at night, doing all the research I can do on yellow nutsedge and how to control it, and finding these really, really expensive herbicides called Sedgehammer. I mean, it's expensive stuff, but it's supposed to be selective. I bought a little bit of it. Really didn't work very well. Kept digging. The Clemson Extension Service and peanut farmers. Peanut farmers don't like this stuff either. And they're losing money with it. So what they published was that if it's nutsedge, if your return treatment on treating nutsedge is longer than 2 weeks, all you're doing is expanding the nutsedge because that gives it enough time to use those starches and regrow that. If you do it like on a return interval less than 2 weeks at a time, then the nutsedge goes away. So I started treating it every 2 weeks. And within like 4 treatments, the nutsedge went away. So this is just a big table I used to identify all the nasty stuff. This was some of the nastiest of the nasties. Same kind of list was on the front part. How am I doing on Todd? I'm going slow. Okay. Okay. So again, I think, okay, I've defeated nutsedge. And I've got this big old scrub berm and everything looked good. And you're probably wondering, why am I showing you a picture of a tire track and some fine straw? So it got to be really, really windy. So after I lost the one section to the really, really rainy part, it got really windy. And I started seeing like, I'm starting to see like kind of packed material from when we drove a truck on it like 3 months ago that you couldn't see before, and realized my seed is in that fluffy dirt between the top and where the tire track was. So my seed is blowing off into the mangroves and it's not going to do well out there. So luckily, again, the prison labor saved us. Went out to Duet Preserve where they had pine plantations, raked up 6 dump trucks of pine straw and covered 7 acres with windrows of pine straw to capture that seed and hold that stuff down in place. And because it did grow, I assume it worked. all sorts of other fun surprises when you do restoration. Because the site was historically in agriculture, every 30 feet had one of these drain tiles going through it, which you would think they were using these 100 years ago. They're working really well. So when I would like cut areas down to get into a mangrove grade, these things would be coming out the site or coming out of the side of that slope, but still working. So then causing a big erosion furrow right there. So they let me do it. Got on a bulldozer with a deep ripper before everything got planted and just drove around and broke them all up underground. So when you go out there and you see little pieces of clay tile, they're not hardy pots. They're all old drain tiles there. I put this picture in there because we used it when we had to dewater it to dig the big basin in the middle, but just look at that thing. Thing's awesome, isn't it? That's it, really. Yeah, it's an old trencher. I did push the button. I'm not enjoying it this long for that. I mean, I do like it. Okay, so I had mentioned we found a lot of old pine stump pieces when we started digging. So money was a big part of this. This was done when there was just no money around at all. So part of our big idea was we're going to create this big basin in the middle, and we're going to put salt water into it so we don't have to maintain it. So we'll be able to afford that part forever. We will sell the dirt, and then selling the dirt will pay for the trails and the boardwalks and everything else. And we'll have done this for free, basically, because we're good dirt salesmen, because we knew of a big neighborhood going in right next to us that needed the dirt. Then the dirt thing got canceled from the neighborhood, but luckily for us, the county was getting sued by DEP at the time, saying your water treatment ponds are too low. You need to pick up your water treatment ponds. You ever thought about the idea of picking up a pond? You need a lot of dirt to pick up a pond. We had a lot of dirt. So then the Public Works Department, which is, they had money, they was like, we'll buy your dirt from you. So we were back in the game. Their engineer had a very tight specification for what that dirt needed to look like. It needed to be perfect crystal sand with no organics. And then when we got digging in here, we found all of these organics. So that was a very, there was a part of the contract that said if the organics were found there, the contractor paid a different rate to get rid of them. So he started licking his chops because he was about to be a multimillionaire. But luckily, they bought it, screened it, and then used it at the residential development right down the road, which was going to be a huge problem. Everybody screamed at us because they said, you're going to end up doing this right in the middle of spring break, and it's going to cause traffic issues, and it's gridlock. It's all thanks to you, government. So we're like, no, we're aware of that. We'd never do this in the middle of spring break. That'd be the worst time to do this. And we had our contracts all lined up, and it was going to award in like December. And then that would give enough time, and we would start where it wasn't going to impact traffic. And then there was like, something was wrong with the bid. Somebody protested something. The way it worked out was we were going to be moving dirt right in the middle of spring break, which worked great because the traffic was already stopped going to the beach. We were going the other way. So we could just pull right out. So it worked out, but I got yelled at either way. Just some before and afters. Yes, it worked. The seeding, after a lot of stress, finally came through. Wetlands grew after we ran the ducks off. The replanted areas grew. There's a little island in the middle of the big tidal basin. It's a presentation on its own, but the real short part of it was constructed with the idea that it could be a secondary rookery site for wading birds if they ever had the need. I've seen raccoon prints on it before, even though we followed all of the setbacks that the literature told us. I guess our Florida raccoons are just willing to go a little further than where they wrote that paper. But there's a mean swan that does nest on it. So don't go looking if she's out there, because she will send you running. I talked about this 16.4 acre seagrass basin. this was working great. We actually got a check for $1.2 million from City of Sarasota to mitigate for their Lido Key dredging thing, that big stink a couple of years back. And this was already colonizing on its own. We're like, we're not going to have to plant this. And then 2018 happened where we started getting all the red tides, and it's just been one thing after the other since then. So we filled it with dead fish, and then the dead fish grew a bunch of algae. The algae shaded out all the grass that was growing there. And it's been some sort of slight seagrass growth, and now back to algae. So it gets full of fish, but it also gets full of algae, which isn't seagrass. So the seagrass thing isn't working well. There was a lot of engineering. That's a different presentation. When you do a fun, yeah, exactly. Throw a turtle picture in there. People like that. So when we had done all this work to kind of rebuild the backbone of this and make this functional habitat again, we saw some opportunities to be able to do some other projects to do kind of rare species work. We did do a reintroduction of Florida golden aster out there, which is interesting because it was a lot of work and it looked really awesome at the start. And then I started noticing that the rabbits would just mow it down to nothing, little stubs every single time. And then we put cages on there and it grew up. And so it was definitely the rabbits doing it. And then the cages went away. And I think you might be able to find one of like the 200 some plants that we put out there now, but I would qualify it as a failure. A lot of people got to have their hands dirty and be a part of the project and learn some things. That was the real value there. But we also permitted it as a waif recipient site for tortoises so that when we do burn it, the animals do have some place to go. But it was it's interesting with the plant reintroductions, like even the original, a year after we seeded, we had great diversity in ground cover. Latris, Carphephorus, all the goodies were out there. When we go out there this weekend, you're going to see a lot of muley grass. You won't see a lot of diversity. And I really think that's due to there are no large predators for rabbits. If you go out there early in the morning or in the evening, the rabbits are everywhere. And they don't seem to like the muley grass, but everything else they're very selective towards. So they do a number. Birds, wrong group. Volunteers, they were a huge part of this thing. Those are people who worked on it. I don't know if there's anything else worthwhile in this presentation. Coming soon, the Perico trailhead, the connector trail of Robinson. It's already done. It looks great. It used to be a bunch of pepper trees. We fixed that. If you ever walk on that trail between Robinson and Perico Preserve, I didn't mean to show you this long. Still red. That's what it looked like. It was just a thicket of pepper trees the whole way. That literally is the same area that the same picture was taken. So it was one of these little baby projects that ate tractors and everything got stuck and everything broke. But finally it got done. It was as much work as the other one. And this is, my child was forced to every volunteer event as we went through here. So it's my thanks for listening slide. She's a little baby with the same tree. And I think that was like, isn't that cute? I made a kid. So I really like it when I get to talk about them, and then we do a field trip about it because it's a lot more fun to go point at stuff. So I don't know how long that was. I feel like I talked for 2 hours.
We got some time for questions.
All right, bring it on.
How'd you get rid of the pepper tree?
Well, there was a couple of different ways. If it was something where we needed it to be cleared out because we were going to seed afterwards, we used a root rake and we drove and just lifted it up, took it out, roots and all. If it's back in other areas, we would usually, if we don't want all the biomass there, stump cut it and then garl on it or inject it, or we just treat in place and let it die over time. It just kind of depended on what the next step was in that area.
Did any trees volunteer on their own, or were they all planted?
I can't say for sure. I don't think it's likely that many would have volunteered on their own because there was just, other than like the one little patch of oaks that's like right there just really wasn't much out there at all. Mangroves on the tidal basins and stuff, we didn't plant the mangrove. They all came in on their own, but there's a seed source for that right there. But like carrot woods came in on their own pretty well from the neighborhood to the south of us, but we have like a lot of mangrove all around us and then really high density just neighborhood stuff from there. So I don't know, but probably not. Yeah.
Thanks. It's incredible, like patience and creativity. Fantastic outcome. Thanks for your time with it. Mention the rabbits. Is there any?
The 2025 Perico Rabbit Stew Festival. Bring a club. No, there's not that I'm aware of.
Introducing coyotes.
I always root for the coyotes out there. I have heard that people see some rattlesnakes there. I'm curious as that site matures and those trees that some of them are getting to be 15. If we get more owls and raptors that want to hang out and cause a little more havoc or make it a little more hectic for the rabbits, because they're like the rabbits that they'll stare you down like I'm the top of the food chain, buddy. One of the things that I like in an attempt to try and save like when we did that chrysopsis transplant project, I thought if I got old snags that were from out in Duet, and then we put those up, the thought being it would be like a predatory bird perch to like encourage hawks or something to stand there and be like, go ahead, rabbit, eat the chrysopsis, do it. But it didn't really seem to help. Is that it? Well, last thing I'll say, because I am the executive director of a nonprofit now, check out our website. These kinds of education, but also, I mean, I'm really focused on doing it, but I love to tell the stories and bring people in on it. And I love that there's some folks that are out here have heard me give a presentation, a version of this 12 to 15 years ago now. So it's, look at you, buddy. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Damon. And yeah, so for those of you that haven't signed up yet, we do still have availability. We're doing the field trip this Sunday at Perico Preserve, and Damon's going to be leading that. So it'll be really cool to kind of see it all in person 10, 15 years after all these pictures were taken. So if you haven't been with Damon out there before, I'd highly recommend you guys sign up, and you can do that on Meetup. So that'll be Sunday. And then we're also doing a double header this weekend on Saturday. So the day before, we're doing a restoration planting at the Mayaca Headwaters Preserve. And that's in partnership with the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast. So we're planting, the goal is to plant 10,000 pop ash trees to restore a pop ash swamp in the headwaters. So that's Saturday, and then the Perico field trip will be Sunday. And then as far as next month, we're going to be having our meeting on Monday, November 18th. It's going to be with Dr. Aaron David with Archibald Station. So he is the director of plant ecology. So it'll be really cool to have him. He's going to be joining us online, but we're also planning to have a watch party here in person, technical difficulty free. I'm hoping that's the goal. But other than that, thanks again, Damon. I hope you guys enjoyed the refreshments. That was something new that we were trying out this time around. Maybe we can come a little bit earlier and have a little bit more social time for our meetings. And I'm going to say we probably have 3 minutes left on the plant silent auction. So if you guys are interested, you can buy your plants back there. Okay, cool. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for coming.